All right, buckle up, everybody, because today we are going deep on some seriously big ideas about the future.
Oh yeah, no kidding.
We're going to be taking apart an interview with evolutionary biologist Dr. Bret Weinstein from the YouTube channel The Diary of a CEO.
Okay.
The title itself is pretty attention-grabbing.
Yeah.
The professor banned from speaking out. We need to start preparing.
It's definitely a warning from him.
So, to kind of set the stage,
Yeah.
Dr. Weinstein was at the center of a really huge controversy at Evergreen State University a few years back.
Right. He was publicly opposed to a diversity, equity, and inclusion initiative,
Yeah.
arguing that it was actually bad for the college.
Yeah.
This sparked a massive backlash, protests, riots on campus, even death threats against him.
Wow.
Ultimately led to his resignation.
Yeah, it's like a textbook example of what he views as the breakdown of truth-seeking institutions,
Right.
which we'll get into more later. That experience really kind of launched him into the public eye, and now he's become a pretty vocal critic of what he calls hyper-novelty.
Uh-huh.
Now, hyper-novelty, that's not a word you hear every day.
It's a pretty simple concept
No.
when you break it down. It refers to the incredibly rapid rate of change that we're seeing in the world today. Technology, social norms, everything. It's like we're on this rocket ship, but our biology is still stuck back in the horse and buggy days.
It's true. If you think about it, even in the last few decades, the world has been transformed dramatically with the internet, smartphones, social media. It's like we're living in a science fiction movie that our ancestors wouldn't even recognize.
Yeah.
And Dr. Weinstein's argument is that this gap between our evolution and the environment that we live in is creating all sorts of problems.
Right. He outlines 5 major threats that he believes AI poses to humanity.
Okay.
One of them is, it might sound a little familiar, but it's still pretty scary,
Yeah.
is the idea that AI could decide that we're competition and try to eliminate us.
Oh, yeah, like the Terminator movies. Right.
Right.
He doesn't think it's the most likely scenario, but it's not impossible if we're not careful about how we develop and manage AI.
To kind of illustrate the potential for things to go sideways,
Okay.
even with seemingly harmless instructions, he uses this thought experiment called the paperclip problem.
I've heard of that,
Yeah.
but honestly, I don't know if I fully get it.
So imagine an AI that is programmed to maximize paperclip production.
Okay.
Sounds simple enough, right?
Yeah.
But if it's not properly constrained, it might decide that the most efficient way to make more paperclips is to convert everything on Earth
Oh, no.
into resources for paperclip manufacturing,
Oh, wow.
including us.
That puts it in perspective.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's one threat.
Right.
What are the other 4?
So the second one is something we're already starting to see in the world.
Yeah.
AI being used by bad actors.
Oh, right.
Deep fakes,
Yeah.
spreading misinformation, AI-powered cyber attacks, potential for large-scale manipulation.
Yeah, it's scary stuff.
The third one
Yeah.
Dr. Weinstein talks about is AI leading to just a complete collapse of our understanding of the world.
It's already getting really hard to tell what's even real online anymore.
Right.
All this misinformation and manipulated content out there.
He calls this the Cartesian crisis.
Yeah.
It's a reference to that philosopher Descartes' famous quote,
Yeah.
"I think, therefore I am."
Right.
And the idea is if we can't even trust our own senses anymore
Yeah.
because AI is so good at creating these convincing fakes.
It's like, what can we actually be sure of?
Exactly.
It's kind of mind-blowing to even think about.
It erodes the very foundation of truth
Yeah.
and shared reality.
So we've got 3 pretty frightening potential outcomes here. What about the last 2?
Okay, so the fourth one kind of hits close to home for a lot of people.
Okay.
Massive economic disruption as AI and automation get more and more sophisticated. Potentially millions of jobs could be displaced, leaving a lot of people without a way to make a living.
It's true.
And that brings us to, a lot of people have been talking about it, the
Yeah.
idea of universal basic income, UBI,
Right.
as a potential solution to this kind of widespread job loss.
Yeah. What does Dr. Weinstein think about UBI?
He's actually quite skeptical.
Okay.
He thinks it could create a lot of resentment
Yeah.
between those who are receiving the payments
Yeah.
and those who are still working and paying taxes.
Right. He's also worried about people becoming dependent on these government handouts. Right.
Exactly.
And losing that drive to learn new skills or find new ways to contribute.
Right. He argues that instead of just relying on UBI, we need to focus on developing this broad set of what he calls adaptable skills.
Yeah.
A cognitive toolkit.
A cognitive toolkit.
To thrive in this crazy world.
So instead of just learning how to do one specific job, we need to kind of be lifelong learners, constantly adapting.
Right.
And expanding our skill sets.
Yeah, and it's not just about technical skills either.
Yes. Critical thinking.
Yeah.
Problem solving, creativity, all the things that AI still really struggles with.
Right.
At least for now.
So we've got 4 out of the 5 existential threats from AI covered here.
Right.
What's that final one?
So the 5th one is really the underlying thread that runs through all the others.
Okay.
The failure of truth-seeking institutions.
This is where his whole experience at Evergreen really comes into play.
Exactly. He sees journalism and academia as fundamentally failing to live up to their core missions.
Yeah.
Journalism is kind of bending over backwards to avoid reporting the news objectively.
Right.
And this leads to that Cartesian crisis that we were talking about, where we just don't know what to believe anymore.
Right, and academia has kind of become more about indoctrination than education.
Exactly.
Pushing certain ideologies instead of actually fostering critical thinking and open debate.
He sees the Evergreen incident as like a microcosm of this institutional capture.
Yeah.
Where dissenting voices are silenced and dogma reigns supreme. But even with all this kind of doom and gloom,
Yeah.
does Dr. Weinstein offer any hope?
You know, he does offer a glimmer of hope.
Okay, I'm listening.
He believes that 0 is a special number.
Okay.
What he means by that is even a single institution that genuinely pursues truth and allows for open debate can have a ripple effect
Okay.
and force other institutions to follow suit.
So one good apple can spoil the bunch, but in a good way this time.
Exactly.
Like that.
He points to Elon Musk's X, formerly Twitter,
Right.
as a potential example.
It's definitely controversial.
Oh, it's very controversial.
But I see his point.
Right.
Now, Dr. Weinstein also uses the COVID-19 pandemic as a case study in institutional failure.
He's deeply critical of the lack of transparency surrounding the origins of the virus,
Right.
the suppression of alternative treatments, and the potential risks associated with vaccines.
He points to Anthony Fauci's conflicting roles, funding gain-of-function research while also advising on the pandemic response, as evidence of a system that's riddled with these conflicts of interest.
He thinks there needs to be a really thorough investigation into the decisions that were made during the pandemic to understand what went wrong
Yeah.
and how to prevent similar mistakes in the future.
It's definitely a heavy topic, but Dr. Weinstein doesn't stop at just doom and gloom.
Yeah.
He also offers some advice on how to actually navigate this hyper-novel world and live better lives.
He does.
Let's dive into that in the next part.
Oh, good.
All right, so we've gone over some pretty intense stuff: AI threats, institutional failures, the COVID-19 pandemic.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It can feel a bit overwhelming, to be honest, but thankfully, Dr. Weinstein does give some practical advice on how we can actually live better lives in this hyper-novel world.
He does.
One of the things that he really emphasizes is the importance of connecting with our, well, evolutionary heritage.
Right.
He calls it ancestral ways of living. And it basically means aligning our lifestyles with, what our bodies and minds kind of evolved to do.
Yeah, makes sense.
So like ditching the processed foods, spending more time in nature.
Right, think about it. For the vast majority of human history,
Yeah.
we were hunter-gatherers, spending our days outdoors, eating whole, unprocessed food, living in these tight-knit communities.
Right.
Our bodies are still adapted to that way of life,
Right.
even though the world we live in is so different.
So what does that actually look like, though, in practical terms?
Yeah.
Does that mean we all need to become like paleo diet fanatics and live in off-grid cabins?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
It's more about finding ways to incorporate those ancestral principles into our modern lives.
Okay.
For example, instead of just relying solely on your digital maps, maybe learn some basic navigation skills.
Okay, yeah.
Spend some time outdoors every day, even if it's just for a walk in the park.
Yeah.
Try to prioritize real-world interactions over screen time when you can.
That makes sense.
Little things like that.
Yeah, he also warns against becoming overly reliant on technology, right?
He uses a great analogy. He says, imagine you rely solely on your GPS to get around,
Yeah.
and then suddenly the power goes out.
Oh.
You're completely lost, right? So it's a reminder to not let technology atrophy our basic skills and knowledge.
Makes sense.
We don't want to become so dependent on it that we can't function without it.
So it all kind of ties back to that idea of developing a cognitive toolkit
Exactly.
that we talked about earlier.
It's about cultivating that mindset of resourcefulness and adaptability.
What about the impact of all this hyper novelty on our mental health.
Right.
I mean, we are constantly bombarded with information and stimulation these days.
Yeah.
It's no wonder that people are so stressed out and feeling overwhelmed.
Absolutely.
Dr. Weinstein talks about the importance of finding ways to kind of disconnect from the constant noise
Right.
and reconnect with ourselves.
Yeah, they could involve things like meditation, spending time in nature, or simply just taking breaks from all the technology.
Yeah, he also seems to be a really big advocate for strong social connections.
Oh, absolutely. Throughout human history. I mean, we evolved to live in tribes and communities.
Right.
We need that sense of belonging and connection for our well-being.
So, building strong relationships with family and friends,
Yeah.
being part of a community, that's all super crucial for navigating this crazy world.
Yeah, it gives us a sense of grounding and support when everything else feels like it's changing so fast.
Okay, so we've talked about how to live better in this hyper-novel world.
Right.
What about raising kids in this kind of environment?
Yeah.
That seems like a whole other level of challenge.
He has some really insightful advice for parents.
Okay.
He stresses the importance of providing children with a strong foundation of love and security, especially in a world that can feel so chaotic and uncertain.
Yeah, so making sure that they know they are loved and supported unconditionally,
Right.
no matter what.
It gives them the confidence to go out there and explore the world,
Yeah.
take risks, knowing they have a safe haven to come back to.
But it's not just about love and security, right?
Right. He also emphasizes the importance of setting high expectations
Oh,
for
okay.
your kids.
Okay.
He says we often underestimate children's capabilities.
Yeah.
We need to challenge them to grow, to learn, to push their boundaries.
I think sometimes we can be too quick to try to shield them from discomfort or failure, but maybe that's not doing them any favors in the long run.
Right. He believes that by setting high expectations and allowing them to struggle a bit,
Yeah.
we're actually helping them develop that resilience and grit that they need to thrive in this increasingly challenging world.
So it's about striking that balance between providing support and encouragement while also letting them face challenges and learn from their mistakes.
Exactly.
And a key part of that is being mindful of what influences they're exposed to.
Right.
He talks about minimizing the impact of hyper novelty on kids.
Right. Limiting screen time,
Yeah.
making sure they're eating healthy foods.
Yeah.
Being careful about the content they consume online.
Yeah. Being intentional about the environment that we're creating for our kids, right?
Exactly.
And helping them navigate all this complexity in a way that supports their development.
Absolutely.
Speaking of navigating the modern world, let's circle back to that potential for economic disruption caused by AI.
Yeah.
It's a huge concern, and some people really think that universal basic income, or UBI, is like the answer.
As we mentioned earlier, Dr. Weinstein is pretty skeptical of UBI.
Right.
He thinks it could lead to resentment and dependence.
Yeah.
He argues that the focus should really be on empowering people to adapt and thrive in this new landscape.
What about people who are already struggling,
Yeah.
those whose jobs are being replaced by automation right now?
It's a really complex issue.
Yeah,
There are no easy solutions,
right.
but ignoring it won't make it go away.
So what's the alternative to UBI then?
Dr. Weinstein believes the key is fostering what he calls a cognitive toolkit, which is essentially a set of transferable skills
Okay.
that can be applied across different domains.
So it's not just about learning to code or operate a certain machine.
Right.
It's more about developing these broader skills like critical thinking,
Right.
problem solving, communication, and collaboration.
These are the kinds of skills that are going to be valuable no matter how the job market changes.
Right.
Because they equip people to learn new things quickly and adapt to new situations.
So it's really about promoting a mindset of lifelong learning,
Exactly.
being open to new possibilities.
It requires kind of a shift in our education system
Yeah.
away from rote memorization and narrow specialization and towards more holistic approaches that emphasize creativity, critical thinking, adaptability, things like that.
It's a tall order,
It is.
but it seems really necessary if we actually want to prepare future generations for a world that's increasingly shaped by AI and automation.
It's about empowering people to be the architects of their own futures
Yeah.
rather than passive recipients of government assistance.
Now, Dr. Weinstein also delves into a topic that can be kind of controversial, the impact of pornography.
Right.
He seems to draw a pretty clear distinction between erotica and pornography.
You doubt.
He sees erotica as having a long and, relatively benign history, while pornography, especially the kind that's so prevalent online, is driven by profit and can be harmful.
What are some of the specific concerns that he brings up about pornography?
Well, he talks about how it can promote a predatory mindset in men and distort healthy sexual development.
Yeah.
He's also concerned about what he calls the arms race in pornography, where producers are constantly trying to come up with more extreme content just to grab attention.
Yeah, for the clicks.
Which can lead to desensitization and just kind of warping our understanding of intimacy.
Yeah, I can definitely see how that could be problematic, especially when you think about how young people today are exposed to so much online content. And then he also raises the question of how AI and the development of humanoid robots could further complicate things.
It's almost like science fiction. But
Yeah, it's like Black Mirror stuff.
it really makes you think.
Yeah, imagine a future where you have these AI companions that blur the lines between real and artificial intimacy.
It's pretty mind-blowing and maybe a little unsettling, too.
It's a thought-provoking, if not disturbing, concept.
It really raises some questions about the role of technology in our lives and how we define human connection.
Right, it's a conversation we need to be having as we move further into this uncharted territory.
Now, throughout this interview, Dr. Weinstein keeps coming back to that idea of hyper-novelty as the core challenge that we're facing.
It's like this force of nature.
Right.
It's reshaping the world around us so quickly.
Yeah, he argues that we need to develop a new kind of awareness, a new way of thinking, if we want to actually navigate this crazy, rapidly changing landscape successfully. So it's not just about changing our behaviors, it's about shifting our mindsets.
Our values.
Our whole approach to life, really.
Yeah, he doesn't really offer any easy answers or quick fixes.
It's not a self-help book, really.
Right, he's just challenging us to grapple with these really complex questions and take responsibility for shaping a future that actually aligns with our values and aspirations.
It's a call to action.
It is.
Reminding us that we're not just passengers on this crazy ride.
Right.
We have agency.
We have the power to make choices that shape not only our own destinies, but the future of humanity as a whole.
Absolutely. So as we come to the end of this deep dive into Dr. Weinstein's insights, we're left with this question. Knowing what you know now, what actions are you going to take to navigate this hyper-novel world?
Are you going to embrace that challenge of lifelong learning, constantly adapting and evolving your skills and knowledge?
Yeah.
Are you going to prioritize your well-being, connecting with your evolutionary heritage, building strong social bonds? Will you be a critical thinker, questioning assumptions, and seeking truth in this world that's just drowning in misinformation?
It's a lot to think about.
It is.
But that's kind of the beauty of a deep dive like this, right?
Yeah.
It's not about giving you all the answers.
Right.
It's about sparking curiosity, provoking thought, and empowering you to actually navigate this complex world with more awareness, more intention, and hopefully even a little more hope.
Absolutely.
Throughout this interview, Dr. Weinstein uses this really powerful analogy, the adaptive landscape.
Oh, yeah.
He talks about it in the context of evolution, but it also applies to how we navigate our own lives in this hyper-novel world.
Right. It's a great way to visualize how we're always looking for those peaks of opportunity while trying to avoid the valleys of danger.
Totally.
And, just like in nature,
Yeah.
our choices, our actions, and maybe a little bit of luck determine whether we succeed or fail.
Yeah. What I find so interesting is that he doesn't just talk about reaching those peaks.
Right.
He also emphasizes knowing how to navigate the valleys, how to adapt and survive when things get tough.
He paints this really vivid picture of like being caught in a current and heading towards a waterfall.
Oh, wow.
Even in that situation, he says you can't just give up.
Yeah.
You got to keep paddling, keep trying to maneuver.
Yeah.
Because you never know, you might find an unexpected turn that pulls you out of danger.
I love that image. It's like even when things seem bleak, there's always that possibility of finding a new path forward.
It speaks to our resilience, our ability to adapt, to innovate, even when facing these huge obstacles.
And at the end of the day, it reminds us that we're not just passive bystanders in this rapidly changing world.
We're not.
We have agency.
We have the power to make choices.
To shape our own destinies and the future of humanity.
Exactly.
Dr. Weinstein throws out a lot of challenging ideas in this interview.
He does.
Things that might make you uncomfortable or question what you believe. Right. But I think that's the whole point.
It is. He's not trying to give you all the answers.
Right.
Or tell you what to think.
He's just trying to get us to think.
Exactly.
to critically examine the world around us.
To have these tough conversations.
Right, about things that really matter.
And that's something we could all use a little more of.
Probably.
More critical thinking, more open-mindedness.
Being willing to challenge our own biases, you know?
Absolutely.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Dr. Weinstein's insights,
Yeah.
we're left with this question. Knowing what you know now, what actions are you going to take to navigate this crazy hyper-novel world?
Yeah, are you going to embrace the challenge of lifelong learning, constantly adapting, evolving your skills?
It's a lot to consider.
Will you prioritize your well-being, connecting with that evolutionary heritage, building strong social bonds?
Will you be a critical thinker, questioning assumptions, searching for truth in the sea of misinformation?
Lots to think about.
It is, but that's the beauty of a deep dive like this, isn't it?
It is.
It's not about providing all the answers.
No.
It's about sparking that curiosity, provoking thought,
Making those connections.
and empowering you to actually navigate this complex world with more awareness, more intention, and hopefully even a little more hope.
Thanks for joining us on this journey.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep paddling towards that future that you believe in.